Hello and welcome to this analysis of Macbeth's character. In this video I will explore how Macbeth goes from being a loyal member of the Scottish ruling class to become a cruel and murderous tyrant. One key consideration in any character analysis is to think about the context, because it has a fundamental effect on character. The first crucial feature is that Scotland here is a hereditary monarchy, meaning that the current king, Duncan, will eventually be succeeded by his son, Malcolm. Now this means that you can't have an ambition to be king, because that role is not available. But when Scotland is under attack, King Duncan does not go into battle himself, and the role of defending Scotland falls to Macbeth, so Duncan appears to be weak. He even cries at one point. Now, in this context, it would be reasonable to ask, who is the most appropriate leader for Scotland, Duncan or Macbeth? And Macbeth has three key strengths that save Scotland. He's described as brave Macbeth, and bravery is something where you're facing danger even where you're fearful. Second, he's described as disdaining fortune. Now this means he ignores what seems to be his fate and fights for what he wants. And thirdly, he has a capacity for extreme violence. And when he faced an enemy, he unseamed him from the nave to the chops. Now this means to cut open a body from the navel to the jaw. So this is a man who by any measure is a hero, but he's a hero who can never be king because the top job is reserved for others. Now the moment that then disturbs Macbeth's normal life, called the inciting incident in storytelling, is when he meets three weird sisters. And weird here means the ability to determine someone's future. And they say to him, "All hail Macbeth, hail to thee, Thane of Glamis. All hail Macbeth, hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor. And all hail Macbeth, that shalt be king hereafter." Now the effect of these words is instantaneous. Macbeth becomes rapt, which means deeply absorbed in thought, and what he instantly thinks about is murder. "My thought, whose murder yet is but fantastical." The weird sister's prophecy seems to have prompted him to think about murdering the king. But how does he reconcile what the weird sisters have said, that he'll be king, with his knowledge that he can't become king because he's not in the line of succession? At first, he thinks he'll just sit around and wait. If chance will have me king, why, chance may crown me. But his wife has different ideas. He needs to take action to seize the crown, but she knows there is a problem, and that problem is Macbeth. He's too nice. He's not without ambition, but without the illness should attend it. Now, illness here means to be morally bad or prepared to do evil. So she's saying that with a hereditary king on the throne, the only way to become king is to make the morally bad decision and kill Duncan. Now Macbeth doesn't immediately rule out a murder, but he does have one major worry. He'd be fine if the assassination could trammel up the consequence and catch with his surcease success. Now to trammel is to catch in a net, and his surcease means the death of Duncan. But it's a big if. How will he get away with murdering a king? His conclusion, he can't. And that's why he says to his wife, "We will proceed no further in this business." Now the next 52 lines are amongst the most crucial in the play, because it's here that Lady Macbeth launches a full frontal assault on Macbeth's character. She says he's a coward. She questions his manliness. She even says she would murder her own child if she'd made such a promise as he had. But notice that he stands firm against this assault until she comes up with the plan to frame Duncan's guards for the murder. His spongy officers, shall bear the guilt. And this is why Macbeth agrees to murder Duncan, because it means there will be no consequences for him or his wife. Well, what could possibly go wrong? Well, quite a lot, it turns out. Now, immediately after the murder, when Lady Macbeth thinks a little water will wash away Duncan's blood and so remove the evidence, Macbeth is less sure. Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? This imagery sums up the immense scale of the problem they have created, but also indicates one dimension they haven't considered: the effect of the murder on their mental health. Macbeth has already seen an imaginary dagger, and is hearing voices by this stage, and so as the play goes on, he will also see a vision of Banquo's ghost. And if they thought they had contained the external consequences by blaming Duncan's guards for the murder, Macbeth then undermines this plan by killing them. And this makes people doubt whether the guards actually did do the murder. Now, after this, whichever sections of Acts 3, 4 or 5 we look at, the societal consequences and the mental consequences now mutually reinforce one another to build greater and greater pressure on Macbeth. For example, he becomes king, but he's plagued by the mental agony of knowing that Banquo's heirs will be kings. And as he memorably puts it, "Oh, full of scorpions is my mind, dear wife." And when the murderers fail to kill Fleance, he says, "I had else been perfect, whole as the marble, founded as the rock, but now I am cabined, cribbed, confined, bound into saucy doubts and fears." And these doubts and fears are why he spends the rest of the play hunting down potential enemies or consulting the weird sisters for further certainty about his future. And when Lady Macbeth dies, all he can say is, "She should have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such a word." It is no coincidence that the first time we heard this word, hereafter, was when one of the weird sisters said, "All hail Macbeth, that shalt be king hereafter." Now there is no hereafter, no meaningful future, which is why he then goes on to say that life is full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And so finally he comes face to face with Macduff and discovers that despite all of his efforts, he couldn't avoid the consequences of his actions. And his final act in character is to fight to the very end. "Lay on, Macduff, and damned be him that first cries hold, enough." Now everything has been stripped away except the continuing will to fight against fate, a fight that he loses. And at the end of the play, Macbeth is described as a dead butcher. And this quote is relevant to finish on because by this point, Macbeth has abandoned any ethical or moral constraints. He's merely a man of violence who cuts up bodies. But do note that what is being condemned here is not the violence itself. After all, Macduff chops off Macbeth's head. What is being condemned is immoral violence in support of one's own ambitions, because it is this that undermines order in the state. So I hope this video has given you some useful insights and it helps you to get greater enjoyment from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. Give a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video and subscribe now so that you never miss any of my future posts.